Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Speculation Station podcast. This is your host, Captain Ketter. I'm joined today by Bodhi. Say hi, Bodhi.
Hello again.
Hey, everybody. So this episode is a re-recording of our last episode. You will never hear because the download got uh, blown into the ether, I guess. So we won't be having that.
Got lost in hyperspace. Got eaten by some purgils or something.
Exactly. So what we're doing for this episode is following the tier list from the generics last time. We are going to the Rebel faction. We're going to talk about the aces and then the uniques from that faction, rank them from S to F, uh, and then we'll bounce back and forth, giving our takes on it. So, to lead us off, Bodhi, would you like to take it away and talk about Biggs Darklighter?
Let me actually pull up Ryan Kingston. I probably have done that.
Yeah, it's
All
okay.
right. So Biggs Darklighter is an X-Wing squadron. He has speed 3, 5 hull, anti-squadron is 4 blues, and anti-ship is 1 red. He has bomber and escort, 2 braces, and he costs 19 points. And he says, before a friendly squadron with escort is at distance 1, suffers 1 damage during an attack, you may reduce the total damage by 1. If you do, choose a friendly squadron with escort at distance 1, that squadron suffers 1 damage. What do you feel about Biggs?
So, Biggs, in the early game for me when I was starting Armada, was one of my favorites because I loved running X-Wings, having a swarm of X-Wings just flying around. But for me, Biggs doesn't give you that much of a benefit nowadays. There is the Biggs ball, and you can leverage that with Gallant Haven and Jan Ors, and it's highly effective on offense whenever you can get a big activation going. But on defense, there's no counter. You end up um, losing everything at once after a while. So if you don't have a good enough or a strong enough alpha, then I think you end up throwing a lot of points out the window. The red dice on all the X-Wings feels bad, but with the addition of Harrison Dula in the X-Wing, it kind of makes it work a lot better. So, like with all the points you have to put into making this guy work, um, I think it makes him a B tier squadron. Not, like, I don't think it can go better than that. Uh, but when you have to apply Torin, you have to apply Bomber Command, and then you would like to have Harrison Dula in the X-Wing. And then if you can throw in Gallant Haven, that keeps it, and Janors, that keeps everything more survivable. So it's a lot of points to invest to make his trick work. Um, but it works. It's good against ships. It's decent against squadrons, but it's not my favorite. What do you think?
Yep, so Biggs to me is the quintessential B tier squadron. He has some really strong things that you can do, but it's infringent on you having 134 points in your squadron ball that is all based around this escort gimmick, as well as Jan Ors, Gallant Haven, Bomber Command Center, Torrenfar. Like all of these things are necessary. They're requirements even. Uh, there are some fleets that have potential. Like I played against a big small fleet at Worlds. The highest echelon of players will bring it. It's not like it's it is very strong and it is a powerful thing to do. Um, in that like it keeps your stuff on the table longer. Um, but yeah, it's the days of the Biggs Ball being the best or one of the best squadron like strategies is long gone. Especially in Rebels that have so many efficient rogues and Chara and Tycho. And there's just so many good things that you can be doing with your squadrons that kind of brings them down a little bit. But overall, it's strong. So B tier.
All right, I'm cool with that. Another thing I would like to inform my viewers is between the two of us, we're actually going to play a little game of where did this faction or where did this squadron end up in our last stream. Uh, we have the photos for it, so that when we When we eventually upload this, you'll see the photos from this recording, but we may have to have a little game between ourselves and see where did we put this guy last time? Is it the same as this time?
Mhm.
All right, so up next we have Corin Horn, who is in the E-Wing. He's speed 4, 5 hull, 4 blue anti-squadron, 1 red anti-ship. He has the keywords bomber, rogue, and snipe 4. 2 braces, and 22 points. What's your take on Corin?
Corin is very fine. Being at 22 points as a rogue, especially with like a where like I mean it's a above average anti-squadron armament and a fairly decent anti-ship armament. Um, and he's survivable with the 2 braces. He's pretty quick with speed 4. The issue with Corrin is that it's just so hard for him to make the cut. Um, Usually, if you're going for an like expensive rogue ball, there's going to be other squadrons that you're going to put in your list first. And if you're not going for that kind of build, then there's still other people that you want first. Um,
Where do
I
you
feel
think
like
he
if
ended up last time?
uh, I think we had him at C tier.
That's correct.
Um, but yeah, I feel like if Corrin was maybe like 20 points, maybe a little bit less. I mean, it's hard to put a rogue that low in points, but if you think of him as just a rogue saber squadron for 10 more points, he starts to feel like a little less interesting. It's not like he has a super cool ability or anything. I don't know. He's fine. C tier is a good home for him.
Yeah, there are some niches where he ends up thriving. I think that's with when you couple him with A-Wings, especially with Shara and Tycho, Tai Taicho, whatever, however you say his name. Um, then you can like hang back while everyone else has to take the counter from the A-Wings or not move, not activate. And then get some snipe off with hopefully not Tycho, Thorin nearby. His bomber is not very reliable with the red dice. I really don't trust those unless I have bomber command or another reroll.
And
So
there's 5 sides that have a
yes,
hit symbol. So I mean it's slightly worse than a black die bomber, and it's slightly better than a blue die non-bomber.
it feels worse though. I'll be honest. A red dice,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean
I if
I
when
feel
it
that.
misses, that's when you're like I'm never gonna do this again. But with a blue dice like Tie Fighter or something, sure I'll throw it at a ship, and if it hits something, then that's great. But I think the reason that feels good is because the points that I invest in it is only 8 points compared to this 22 or something.
Yeah, for sure.
So C tier, I have no problem with that.
All right, up next we have Dagger Squadron. Dagger Squadron is a non-ace unique B-wing. It has speed 2, 5 hull. Anti-squadron is 2 blues and a black. Anti-ship is a black and a blue. It costs 15 points and it has bomber and swarm.
All right, where do you think this guy ended up?
Um, I remember I had it in D tier, and then I think we negotiated it up a little bit. Did we put it in C?
We did, yes. So this guy ended up in C tier. For me, the extra point from the B wing and having swarm kind of makes this guy a little bit more of a heavy hitter against squads, which is where these guys are lacking with their usual 3 blue dice against squadrons. Um, so I think he's kind of effective. He's kind of nice to have, and he can work well with other squadrons. So he can do a little bit of both, a little bit of anti-squad, but he's very good at bombing.
Yeah,
His
I mean, if you have the synergy pieces to make B-wings work in your fleet, then there's probably not a lot of reasons to play normal B-wings instead of dagger, unless you really need that 1 point. Um, It's just a strictly better B-wing. Um, but even then, in my opinion, B-wings are not. They're definitely a casual game piece. Uh, I don't think they work as well competitively, and so I think it's hard to put it in any of the higher tiers.
Yeah, you do have to put in the work to make them function, I
Yeah.
think. I had a couple lists with rapid launch bays where they pop out and then they get their attack off, but the problem with that is they basically get one shot and then the squadron from the other player is just going to come and tie them down. So it's it's not that all that efficient, I would say.
Yeah.
All right. So C tier for those guys. Up next we have Dash Rendar in the Outrider. He is speed 4, 6 hull, 4 blue anti-squadron, 1 black anti-ship. His special text reads, while attacking you may reroll 1 die for each enemy squadron or enemy ship at distance 1. He also has bomber and rogue, and he has 2 braces and is at 24 points. If you want to pause to guess, where would this guy end up for you?
This one I distinctly remember because you wanted him an S. I did not feel like Dash was an S tier squadron, so I managed to negotiate him down to A.
Yeah.
Uh,
This was my hot take, I think, for the day. I think Dash Rendar is very efficient for his points. And obviously not as good as another squadron we'll talk about later, but if you need something to come through, you can fly this guy in there. He'll get a reroll on his bomber dice, and then he can effectively go anti-squadron. And then especially with touring around, he gets a bunch of rerolls.
I mean, Dash works. He's kind of like Corrin, where it's hard to fit him into a fleet for me. I mean, he's at that point cost, and like he's efficient at what he does. Um, it's just it feels like there's other options that I usually want, and so he doesn't get taken that much. Although last podcast, I did say that I'd have to try him out, and I did manage to put him on the table. It wasn't. I said I'd bring him to one of our local 2-round tournaments. But I ended up playing him in a casual game with this Radis Rogues list,
Okay.
and he felt honestly not bad. So last time I was like, Dash is not an A tier squadron, but now I feel like he's probably in the middle of like B and A if I were to like if this was my own personal list for a purely competitive
Yeah.
thing. But I mean, for the mix of casual and competitive that we're trying to appeal to here, I feel like he's a solid A.
Yeah. I think he when you're bringing him in a list, he's he's effective. Points not quite points effective. Like you could bring Rogue Squadron and for much fewer points, a little bit less effective at bombing, and doesn't stick around as long. But uh, yeah, I think this guy's also he's fast. He's speed 4.
Yeah, and 6 hull is nothing to scoff at. Like 5 and up hull, it starts well above 5 hull is when it starts becoming an actual investment to kill a squadron. Uh, you can no longer like 1 or 2 shot it, especially with the prices. It's going to take 3 or 4 shots. Um, so yeah, I
True.
mean, all right. Next up, we have one of my favorites. This is Dutch Vander in the Y-wing squadron. He's got speed 3, 6 hull. Anti-squadron is 3 blues. Anti-ship is a black. He's got bomber, heavy, 2 braces, and he costs 16 points. And he says when a squadron you attack suffers at least 1 damage, you may toggle its activation slider to the activated side. If it was already activated, it suffers 1 additional damage instead.
This guy ended up at S tier last time, and I think he is deserving of that location.
Yeah,
He is super good at anti squadron with his special ability. What do you think about him?
I love Dutch. Honestly, he might be my favorite Rebel Squadron. I don't know. I end up taking him a lot because he's 16 points, which is really cheap. Um, especially compared to some of the other older aces that kind of end up drifting into the higher point costs. Um, but he's just a great multi-role piece, which is what a lot of the rebel squadrons are wanting to do anyway. Um, his ability is great in the current meta because there's a lot of Imperial aces that are brace brace. There's a lot of Rebel aces that are brace brace. Um, and if they can't, like, as long as you get one damage, you're either activating it or you're dealing an extra damage. So he's either like slightly worse Anakin or slightly worse Hondo. Um, but I mean that's kind of the point. He's a multi-role type of dude, and he does everything very efficiently for very cheap. And the only downside is that he's heavy, but you're gonna have other squadrons to fix that problem. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, the ability to turn off another squadron of the enemy player is cannot be understated. Let's say if that squadron is Anakin Skywalker, which I think without a doubt maybe the best squadron in the game right now, uh, then you can save yourself a world of hurt and so much damage. So if you do that like 2 turns in a row, there's like 4 damage maybe with Adept coming in, and then 2 splash damage per squadron. So if you do that for 2 rounds, you can mitigate an insane amount. I think he's well deserving of S tier. The only downside for him really is that he's not rogue. You can't. You have to activate him. So usually the way I play him is I sling him into a group of squadrons along with an escort, and then activate him whenever I need to. I don't necessarily make a point of it unless I have a specific squadron that I need to target. And then after the squad war, he can still bomb. So very good all around.
Sweet.
Yep.
Do you want to read the next one?
Yeah, I can. Up next we have Finn Rao, Mandalorian Gauntlet Fighter. He is speed 4, 7 hull, 2 blue and 1 red against squadrons, and 1 black and 1 blue against ships. His special text reads, after your activation, if you were activated by a squadron command, choose up to 2 non-unique squadrons at distance 1 of you. The chosen squadrons may activate as if they were activated by that squadron command. He also has the keywords assault and escort. He has 1 brace and he has 24 points. Give me a hot
Yeah.
take on this guy.
Hot take. Finn was the coolest part of Rapid Reinforcements 2 after the errata. I don't know. So Finn is really, really cool, and he works well in a lot of strategies. He kind of like he doesn't end up falling into many of my lists, but all of the lists that I had before he came out, that I wanted him in, like he's made those lists better. He works well with big balls because of escort. You can activate. I think I had like a 6 squadron big ball type of thing that I was able to activate with 1 assault frigate activation. Like the whole ball. Maybe it was 7 squadrons actually. I don't remember the specifics, but he does open up a lot of interesting things, especially because he carries over stuff like flight commanders and Yavaris, um, to allow you to, or flight controllers, sorry, to add an extra dice.
Where do you think he
Um,
ended up last time?
I remember we put him up higher than I originally thought. I felt like he was a B tier. Did we put him in B tier?
He ended up at A tier.
Okay. Um, I don't know. I feel like he's slightly worse. But I mean, I think he's okay in A tier. Um,
I think he has a lot of untapped potential that people don't realize. Um, in 2 ways. One is that he kind of acts as relay. So you don't need the 15-point relay squadron. You can use this guy to activate a couple non-uniques and then give them the bonus abilities. So,
And yeah, it's relay of distance one instead of, uh, or actually, choose up to two. Yeah, it's relay with distance one instead of distance three.
I mean, you can activate this guy and he can fly speed 4, shoot, and then people at distance 1 of him, so
That's
effectively
true.
speed 5 away. So speed 5 away from where he is could be speed 3 away from a ship and then speed 5. So it could be speed 8 away from a ship effectively. And
I, Fenn definitely is the best gauntlet fighter in the game. So much so that the gauntlet fighters that I own are actually in my Rebel box, not my Empire box. Uh,
as they should be.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like the use cases are it's slightly limited for a 24-point non-rogue squadron. But I mean, yeah, he's still really good.
Yeah, I agree. The thing about him that makes him exceptional, I think, the rogue kind of pseudo ability is really good, but the assault ability coupled with it, um, I guess it's not coupled with it, but alongside it is really good. That's actually how I ended up losing a game at LSO a couple years ago. I was playing against Jordan, who won the tournament. Shout out Jordan from Utah. Uh, I forget what his Discord name is, but Solo Serenity, I think.
Hmm.
Um, but he flew Finn Rao in. I made an open pocket so that I would invite his squadrons to come and attack me in my flagship. And it was the only game that entire tournament where I took a squadron command instead of a nav token on my first turn, and I regret it. So in that game, what you'll see is I create a pocket for the enemy squadrons to come in, and so I can pounce on them. He sends in, I think, Finn Rao, gives me a raid, and he gives me the nav raid, and it's kind of what loses me the game because my plan was I was just going to speed away, and his black dice MC30s weren't going to like dump their dice on any of my ships. But then that nav raid kind of screwed up my whole plan, and I could have avoided it if I just took that token. So I learned my lesson, but you can watch how it plays out in that game from LSO in 20, what is it, 2022, I think. Yeah, that was when no, it would have been 23, I think, because the ticket was on the line.
Yeah, that was when Jordan won last year's.
Yeah, last year. Okay, I thought 2 years ago, something like that. It's getting all mixed up in my head. But yeah, A tier, I think he earned it. Yeah. So who's up next?
All right, next we have Gold Squadron. Gold Squadron is a Y-wing squadron. Has speed 3, 6 hull. Both anti-squadron and anti-ship have 2 blue dice, and it has bomber for 12 points. Uh, Gold Squadron is easily S tier. It's so efficient. All of the downside of bringing a Republic Y-wing, or sorry, a Rebel Y-wing is just not there with Gold Squadron. Like it's heavy. It's not heavy. It has 2 blue dice, which get rerolls from Torin and Bomber Command Center. So this thing's almost always doing 2 damage. Um, if you can, yeah, like if you have Ghost Hera in your fleet, you're giving it Rogue, which is super annoying because it's going to get in there for 2 damage, like at the end of the round. Um, yeah, I mean, it Gold Squadron is so efficient. There are very few Rebel fleets that I build where it's not just one of the first things that goes into the squadron section of the list builder.
Yeah, it's so cheap. You always want to throw it in. The reason is because it's either going to be bombing for 2 damage usually, or it's going to be tying down squadrons. And it's got 6 holes, so they really have to work on it. Um, it's speed 3, so it's not super fast, but for 12 points, it is a no-brainer. I think it earns the S tier uh, pretty well in my book. But the majority of the reason you take it is because it doesn't have heavy.
Yeah.
So even if it didn't have bomber, I would still take it.
I mean, it's a better B wing in almost every way. It's a better Y wing. It honestly it feels like a better X wing too. It just does all of the four squadron pack one generic jobs aside from A wings, but better.
uh,
Gold Squadron real good.
yeah, if they were to like reword or rework some of these squadrons, I think something they would do to boost the X-wing is give them like four hull but plus one shield, and then the shield just regens each round as if it were like an extra health. I think that would help them out a little bit.
I mean, that seems like a whole extra mechanic. But
Yeah, yeah, that could have been my elevation thing.
yeah. All right. Well, we really like Gold Squadron, but what about its neighbor Green Squadron?
So I have a feelings about this guy. Where do you think he ended up last time?
Do you want to read them first?
Oh, sure, yeah. So he is in an A-wing squadron. He is 5 speed, 4 hull, 3 blue anti-squadron, and 1 black anti-ship. He has the bomber keyword, counter 1, so he loses 1 counter, and he has 12 points. Where do you think he ended up?
Um.
Where does he end up in your book on your feels?
Okay.
Based on your
So
feels.
yeah. Um. I've had a decent amount of success with Green Squadron. I won my World's Invite with Green Squadron in the list. Um. But it's definitely a little niche. If I remember correctly, we had it in C with Dagger.
Yeah, that's right.
Um, I don't know. So like there are some use cases for green. It is one of the best Riken like zombie squadrons. Because they're gonna send their stuff in, they're gonna kill it, you're gonna get counter on all of those shots, and then if it dies, like you keep it around and it can tie stuff down. Or if they like have grit and leave the engagement, then you can send it off to do one last bombing run. Uh, it's overall just really solid. The places where it lacks is when compared to an A wing, it's 1 point more, and you lose a counter. And A wings are great because they're speed 5 and they're 4 hull, and they have really solid anti ship and anti squadron. And Green Squadron, I mean, very obviously because of the bomber, it does more towards the anti-ship side. And like it's taking up the slot of something that wants to be more in the anti-squadron multi-role type of thing. Um, I don't know. I feel like you have to be playing a dedicated bomber fleet to actually want green.
Either that or just Riken, I think.
Yeah.
I have negative feelings for Green Squadron. Um, for me, I'm paying 1 extra point for losing a counter, which is kind of what makes A-Wings good, is their counter too. And then I'm gaining bomber, which is effective if you take like precision strike, I think is uh the objective that has the bomber keyword. But I kind of hate this guy. Like he doesn't stick around. He's like limp wristed on offense with 3 blue dice. It's not that good. And he's so fast that he's usually jumping around. He may not be near Torin. And then uh the bomber keyword and the black dice just doesn't give me enough extra compared to what I would get out of a normal A wing. So for me, I'd rather just not take this guy. If I had the extra point, I'd leave it for a bid and take an A wing rather than take this guy. So I don't remember where I put him last time. I may have had him in D tier and you negotiated him up to C tier.
Yeah,
But
that might be accurate.
so C tier, it's okay. It's a functional squadron. You you have to use them differently than an A wing because
Yeah.
he can't he can't uh he can't do much effectively. He cannot counter well. He can't do offense well. He's got 1 dice on for bombing, which is like nice, but you have to activate him. So Yep. C tier's okay with me. Up next, we have Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon. Speed 3, 7 hull, 2 black, 2 blue against squadrons, and then 1 black, 1 blue against ships. His special text reads, at the start of the ship phase, you may activate as if you were activated by a squadron command. He has grit, rogue, 2 braces, and he costs 26 points. Uh, where do you think this guy ended up last time?
Oh, I know we had him in F tier. Talked about it
Yep.
before the pod too. Um, yeah, Han's really rough, and I think part of it is just the opportunity tax of not being able to take Lando. I wonder if we would see Han more if Lando wasn't in the game. Um, but I mean, even before, like I wasn't playing at the time, but before Lando was in the game, Han was kind of a joke. Um, I don't think there has been a single ability that has been forgotten more times than Han Solo's like activate at the start of the ship phase thing. Um, like every time I've played him, I've never actually remembered to do that. Um, there's a few times where it comes up and it's like, okay, I can do the cool thing, but even then, it doesn't even feel that great. Like if you really want to get him in there first, or like get your speed 3 not quite bomber in there first. Take Lando and have 3 points for bid for first player, and then just activate it with a ship. I don't know. Han just doesn't have a lot of use cases. He's a little overpriced, and he's
Yeah,
F tier.
he is the F tier. He is he's just not good. Like he's decent anti-squadron with his black and blue dice. He has 1 black, 1 blue against ships, which is great. But he doesn't have bomber, which I mean, maybe he doesn't deserve bomber. He's in a Millennium Falcon, but um, his special ability, the use case is only if I want to pre-alpha strike, which is like not very useful unless you also have the alpha strike. So it would mean that you have 1 less squadron that you can act or need to activate during an alpha strike, or you may be able to lock down some squadrons from the other player after they alpha strike or before the alpha strike, excuse me. But the best case for his use is you go and shoot a ship and hopefully get a couple damage to kill it before it does its reserve reinforced blast doors. Yeah, because of his timing, he ends up going before that. So that's about it. He's not super fast. He's got a lot of hull. He can stick around, but oftentimes he's not useful, I guess. As
I don't
also
know.
overpriced, way too overpriced.
Yes. There are some the other use that the only time I've actually put him on the table, I should say, is in a Sato list, because if you're first player, you can send him in to like fulfill the requirement of having a squadron near your opponent's ships to replace dice. So I mean he's kind of cute and quirky for that, but still it's not enough to pull him out of F.
Yep. You want to take the next one?
Sure. Next up, we have Harrison Dula in the Ghost. Speed 3, 8 hull, anti squadron, 2 blues, 2 blacks. Anti ship is a blue and a black. She has 1 brace, grit, rogue, and is 28 points, and reads at the start of the squadron phase, choose up to 2 friendly squadrons at distance 1 to 2. Those squadrons gain rogue until the end of the round. Um, yeah, so I actually, when we recorded this last time, I had advocated for her in B. I flew her in that Radis list that I had Dash in, and she didn't quite pull her weight. It might have just been like that specific fleet because she does do really well in some others. Um, I advocated for her highly because there's like the Riken Rogues or Bracken Rogues list with CR90s that um, it'll use just all rogues and then Hera, Tycho, and Gold Squadron, and then Hera can give Golden Tycho Rogue, or some other non-rogue ace instead of Tycho. I think I've seen it with Wedge before, uh, but I don't know. She really makes that squadron ball and that fleet click. Um, I don't know. Now I'm. It might be the recency bias of her not impacting the game as much. But I was playing against a fairly low squadron contingent, and so my stuff, like the rogue, helped for me to activate it, send it in, and then like tie down their things. But then they just kind of sat there, so I didn't really need the rogue for the rest of the game. So I don't know. I still think that she's quite solid. Um, I don't know. She's definitely not higher than B tier. But
Yeah, I think that her use case is very small. Like she has a niche, and the people who make her work the best are two people come to mind in my history in Armada. Is Mr. Large Package, who had Gallant Haven list, Kirsta Gate Gallant Haven list. He brought that to LSO in 2023. And then the other person I played against that has a really good use for Harrison Dula and the Ghost is Angry Ewok. And I don't know if he has a YouTube video about using her or not, but she really makes those lists really work. Um, in large packages list, it was because he had Skirgs in the back, and everything would activate, and then the last part of the round would be two Skirgs flying in, throwing 4 dice with Bomber at speed 3, which was super painful because if he was then first player, he would activate, shoot you with the ship, um, or activate his squadrons first, and then shoot you with the ship. So these guys would come in throwing 8 dice, and then you'd get hit by a ship. Uh, so super painful. And then with Angry Ewok's list, he was using them with A-Wings, and then that would allow him to use Hera kind of like a de facto flotilla, activating squadrons in a way. So during the squadron phase, these guys could fly out. Uh, their A-Wings would fly out, do 3 damage, and then whenever the next round would come around, they would do the counter damage as well. So you get the most effectiveness out of A-Wings whenever they're doing that, doing extra damage when they fly in as opposed to just moving and tying people down. So I think she is B tier. I couldn't see her at A tier unless like she dropped down in points.
yeah,
So
I mean, I think
she's
she is
really
the
difficult
most.
to kill.
Yeah, she's the most expensive squadron in the game. Actually, is
The only one that's
yeah,
up there is Morna.
yeah.
Morna
I
Q.
think Morna might also be 28.
Yeah, I think she is either 28 or 27.
27. So yeah, Hera is the most expensive squadron in the game.
Okay. Yeah,
All right, so
I don't think I think B tier's the right spot. Up next we have Harrison Dula again in the X-Wing. She's going speed 3, 5 hole, 2 blue, 1 black and 1 red against squadrons, and she has 1 black against ships. Her keyword reads, while a friendly squadron that has escort is at distance 1 to 2, it has adept 1, so it can reroll 1 dice. It also, excuse me, she also has dodge 1, so while she's defending against squadrons, she can force them to reroll 1 dice. And she has the keyword bomber. She is 2 braces, and then she's 23 points. Hera is excellent whenever you fly her with a Biggs ball. She's nice to have when you don't have Biggs as well, and you just have some X-Wings. She leverages, she helps like Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles. There's been multiple times where I have seen Wedge Antilles shoot 6 dice at somebody, and then they all turn up accuracies. So it sounds wild, but I've seen it happen multiple times. And then with Luke, whenever Luke is maybe outside of bomber command range, or you don't have bomber command center, uh, having Luke be able to re-roll his bomber dice is super, super huge because then you can get a face down on somebody instead of dealing damage to the shields. Another thing that I think we'll get to later is she couples really well with Nora Wexley because the red dice from the X-Wings effectively become three-sided doubles if you use her crit ability against shields. So having her and then Bomber Command Center makes the red dice actually super viable in a X-Wing ball. So where do you think we put her last time?
We had her in B tier,
Yeah.
and with the other Hera. I feel like if a big ball is going to be relevant in any tournaments in 2024 and beyond, it's going to have Hera in an X-wing in it. Biggs provides the defensive capabilities, and Hera X-wing provides the offensive capabilities. Um, she is so like Adept 1 is so strong for both the amp. Like she makes the slightly inefficient red dice that you have with your X-wings. She makes them stick. Like we talked about that in Big's portion, where having the red dice with Bomber doesn't feel particularly great. With Hera, it's very solid. Um, I don't know. She's she and Biggs go together. Uh,
Yeah,
they're
I think she uh she helps out Finn Rao as well whenever you're trying to get that assault to proc.
oh yeah. I mean,
She helps
anything
out.
that says escort on it is going to be helped by Hera
Yeah.
nearby.
And then she doesn't have it, so she can hide underneath the escort, which is great.
Yeah.
But if you bring her, then you're investing a lot of points into X Wings, and that's kind of why she's at B tiers because X Wings in general are just not that great.
Yeah. I
If
mean,
you
she
fly,
requires you to have the rest of your fleet or the rest of your squadron contingent involving escort in some way, and that's just too much to like. You can't ever just throw her into a list because why not? You have to build around her.
yeah, I think that's a lot of our squadrons that end up below at B tier or below.
Yeah.
Another thing about X Wings is whenever you're flying them, you have to worry about flak. You have to worry about
Mm-hmm.
flak range. So I've seen Biggs balls go down pretty quickly if someone just dedicates their attacks to flak only instead of shooting your ships. So you have to be wary of that. And then if you're going against it, you can you're trying to soak up all the points you can. So go flacking for a couple rounds uh, and then focusing on ships after they're closer is kind of better than trying to just focus on ship contact or combat. Who do we have next?
Next, we have Jan Ors in the Moldy Crow. Jan Ors is speed 3, 4 hull, 3 blue for anti squadron, 1 black for anti ship. She has counter to intel, double brace, 19 points, and while a friendly squadron at distance 1 to 2 is defending, it can spend your defense tokens. Jan is really, really good. She's kind of like the Axe of the Rebels. Or I guess Axe is the Jan of the Republic, but um, I mean, her ability helps out so much. I mean, it's going to help your generics because it's going to keep them around longer. It's going to help your aces if your opponent has accuracies. You can be more careless with the aces defense tokens and then fall back on Jan's. If people try and go for Jan, then she has counter 2, which is going to put out a decent amount of output. She has intel, so she's going to help bomber balls, and she's going to help a small. Well, you probably don't want her in a small screen, but she's going to help your anti-squadron contingent reposition to tie down things. I honestly didn't realize until LSO this year that she bombs with a black. I don't know if my copy is just slightly discolorized or I am just blind or something. But for some reason, I've been rolling her as a blue, and I'm sure my opponents have been playing it right, and I just have never noticed. But I have played her and rolled it as a blue up until this summer. Um, but yeah, she just does so much. She helps the defensive capabilities of your fleet. And when you pair her with stuff like Gallant Haven or Biggs, I mean, you can take a 4 dice attack, Gallant Haven, or use Jan Brace to make it 2, then Gallant Haven it down to 1, and then send that 1 damage to someone else if you're playing a Biggs ball. That amount of damage reduction is really powerful for fleets that want to win the squadron war. So, Jan is S tier for me.
Yep, that's where we put her last time. She is exceptional for both for uh heavy or light squadron builds because the light squadron builds can stick around a lot longer. And then if they don't have escort, if you don't have escort, then they'll want to focus down on Jan and then your other squadrons.
Mm.
So that's nice. The intel really helps out, especially when it was old intel. Then you could just put her in range, and then your squadrons could fly out no matter what. I do think the intel change to give everyone grit instead is a much better solution to the mechanics of the game. Um, but yeah, her damage reduction potential is exceptional, and especially like you said, coupled with Gallant Haven. Oftentimes you'll see them paired together, but I like flying her just
Yeah.
even without it. She, I think her and Finn Rao can be used coupled together really well because then you can use her braces because Finn Rao only has one brace, and then also you're going to have a lot of generics supposedly, I guess, with them two. So you can use the braces on the generics and then activate them with Finn Rao. So excuse me, there's a lot of synergy there.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, she's S tier. Up next, we have Kanan Yaris. Yaris. He's in the Hawk 290. His key text says, while attacking a ship, well, I guess we'll do this in order like everything else. He is speed 3, 4 hull, 2 blue, 1 red against squadrons, and then 2 blue against ships. His key text reads, while attacking a ship, you may spend 1 die with a crit icon. If you do, the defender gains 1 raid token of your choice. He also has Assault, Cloak, and Rogue. It's a lot of stuff going on in this card. He also has 2 braces, and he has 19 points. The key text, I should point out, is separate from Assault. So effectively, you could put on 2 raids on a single ship. But Kanan, I think because of his low hull value and the lack of a scatter, just dies so quickly. He's also not fast at speed 3. Oftentimes with this guy, what you want to do is you want to jump him to where there are no squadrons, do some assault and raiding, and then uh, cloak onto an asteroid or something to get uh, obstruction. And then the next turn you can jump out and go somewhere else. But often he'll just get tied down by something. The cloak helps a little bit, but you really can't take too many hits with this guy and he just dies. So for that, I put him at F tier.
Yeah. So Kanan is one of the weird F tier squadrons where I don't know. It's like I look at the card and it doesn't seem too bad. I mean, 19 points for a rogue ace. That kind of feels good. He's got 2 blues for anti-ship. Granted, it's not bomber, but you have potential to do 2 damage in the faction that has Torn Far. But I mean, the main issue that it boils down to is rebels just don't really need to put raid tokens, and the unique ability that he has of putting an extra raid token is just kind of wasted. Um, so the only time that I've ever seen Kanan in a fleet like function as like actually prove itself as a somewhat powerful piece. The only time that I would recommend Kanan is if you're flying the Starhawk with the tractor beam. You can drop them down to 0 if you go to speed 0, and then use Kanan to put nav raids, and then you can use the Phylon tractor beam to remove any nav tokens that they might have. So it basically keeps them at speed 0 for an extra turn. which depending on how the rest of your fleet is set up, that's either going to give you another Starhawk activation to pump dice into it. I've also seen like versions of Hawk lists that have an MC30, and so they'll trap you at 0 and then send in their 30 and do a bunch of bombing. But all of this is like one really niche situation that makes a mediocre squadron pull its weight. So for all other instances, Kanan is unfortunately an F tier.
Boo this man. I'm not you, this guy. This Kanan. I really hate this card. Because I want it to work.
No.
It's just so bad. Alright. You want to take the next one?
Sure. So next up we have Ketsu Onyo in the Shadowcaster. Speed 4, full 4 hull. Anti-squadron is 3 blue. Anti-ship is 2 blue. She has Bomber, Grit, Rogue, Brace, Scatter, 22 points. And when an enemy squadron is at distance 1, its speed is reduced by 2 to a minimum of 1. I really like Ketsu, even though I tend to roll. It's probably just like confirmation bias, but I feel like I rolled double accuracies with her more than any other double dice bomber. But actually, I think it might have in our game at Osmo last year. I sent Ketsu after your CR90 that ran away.
Oh
And I
yeah.
think she rolled 2 accuracies, and it kept a TP away from me.
Oh, that's
Um,
right. Yeah. Um, that was a wild game.
yeah.
I have some major regrets about that game.
uh, for the listener, we played. This was the first time that I ever met Josh, and we played at Osmo last year. Final round of day 2. Um, I honestly didn't think that either of us had a shot at jumping the group. Um, but Texas Honey Badger was almost guaranteed to win the event, and he already had his invite, so we were kind of fighting for second place. And Josh sent in his MC75 much faster than his squadrons, and my squadrons were able to tear it apart. Uh,
Exceptionally quick. So
yeah.
it was scary actually. I knew well, I played it wrong. What I should have done was just waited and let you have the station. The way
Hmm.
we were situated, he was going to be on the station and we were going to be in a ram off, which I should not have been too worried about. I think you had uh electronic countermeasures on your
Hmm.
guppy instead of reinforced blast doors, which is what I normally do. So that would have meant that the damage would have come off once per turn, as opposed to maybe 4 at one
Yeah.
time, which I like to fight that way. But and then I had Gallant Haven popping out of Profundity, and it would have been 2 damage to 1, and then one of them would have been face up. So my plan was deny you the station. So I said, you know what? I said to myself, let's jump up, speed 3, plant the MC75 on there, and hopefully he can't get onto it. So I couldn't jump far enough. So I got like halfway on the station, and then you were able to get onto it as well. And then my squadrons caught up eventually, but by that time, I had to activate the MC75 before it died, and it just ran itself to death with its last health, just because it got eaten alive by the squadrons. It was a textbook case of what not to do with the ship when you're with your squadron screen. It was sad. But my CR90B also did a 1v1 on your CR90B and took it out, which I was super happy
Yeah,
about.
that was a fun little duel. Um, well, anyway, all of that's to say, I really like Ketsu. So she has a lot of parallels to Dash. They're both kind of in that low 24 points. She's 2 points cheaper, um, but I mean they're both good bombers that have Rogue. Um, her ability is almost never actually useful. There are some cases where your opponent has Tycho and you're able to lock him down. Um, but I mean, if it ever comes up, it's probably going to win you the game, but it's probably never going to come up, type of thing. Um, but I mean, she trades 2 hull for a scatter instead of a brace. So it's up to you if you prefer having more hull or if you prefer having that defense token. Um, but they're both speed 4 and they're both efficient bombers. Ketsu doesn't have the reroll, but she's 2 blue instead of just a black. Um, the thing that sells Ketsu for me personally is grit. I really value having grit. Um, but yeah, I like Ketsu. If you think of her as just uh, expensive, like a premium double blue bomber that is fast and not the easiest thing to kill, then you're going to be happy with it. Don't bring her planning to use the ability much. So I had Ketsu up in A tier with Dash.
Yep, that's where we had her last time. I agree with you. I think she is quite versatile with her speed 4 and 3 anti squadron with Rogue, and then the 2 blue anti ship are quite useful. And then you can couple that with Torin to get a reroll if you need it. Although usually what happens with Ketsu is that she'll fly in and shoot an unshielded side somewhere, which may or may not be in the range of Torin. With her speed, she can also reach out and steal the deal on an enemy ship that's trying to get away. So, A tier. Up next, we have Kian Farlander, another favorite of mine, like Kanan. He is in a B-Wing, speed 2, 5 hull, 3 anti squadron that are blue dice, and 2 black anti ship. His special text reads: while attacking a ship, if the defending hull zone has no shields, you may re-roll any number of dice in your attack pool. He's the bomber keyword, 2 braces, and he's 20 points. Kian Farlander is terrible. Terrible, terrible. He's B-Wing. He's speed 2, so he's slow. You've got to put in other points to make him move, or you got to dump him off. And then by the time you dump him off, it's going to be uh, turns 4, 5, or 6, maybe turn 3 if you dump him off a little early. Um, and then you probably won't get to use his ability except for maybe once. And the reason is because the enemy squadrons will jump on you to keep you from shooting the ships. And then while you're shooting the ships, usually they have shields until the end of the game. So it can help to seal the deal on a ship and seal the kill. You can't use Torin on it, so you have to have Bomber Command Center. So you could get 2 rerolls effectively, but he's 20 points. He's not worth it. He's no good. I think he needs a rework. Something needs to be done about this. Um, Same with Kanan. It's like some of these squadrons are functional in such a niche that it's just like bringing them just means that you're only bringing him for his braces, honestly. That's why you're bringing him. You don't really care that there's 2 black dice. The blue dice is the same percent chances that you get a hit, but it doesn't have the doubles. But yeah, the reason you bring him is for the 2 braces, but why would you bring a double brace bomber that's 2 speed? You'd much rather take something else, in my opinion. So I have him in F tier.
Yeah, when you started out, uh, another favorite like Kanan. When I just heard the another favorite, I was like, wait, what? um, I don't know. I've seen Kian exactly one time, and it was against Ben, aka Downsize It. And he had a fleet that he was messing around with over the summer for a bit that used B wings, and Kian was in there. And honestly, like if he was a bit cheaper, I feel like, or maybe make him a bit more expensive, but give him speed 3 or something. I don't know. It's just like double black with bomber is really scary. Getting hit for 4 damage in one squadron shot, like it sucks. And that has happened to me. Um, but I mean, yeah, he requires too many moving pieces to get him to work. Rerolling dice from his ability is good. Uh, just like Josh said, like it's not guaranteed that they're gonna have no shields. No, I don't know. He's just Just doesn't quite cut it in my book. So,
Yeah.
you know who does cut it?
Yeah. Tell me.
Lando Calrissian in the Millennium Falcon, uh, who is speed 3, 7 hull. Anti-squadron is 2 blues, a red and a black. Anti-ship is a red and a blue. He has grit and rogue, double brace, and 23 points. And he says, while attacking, you may discard a defense token, to set 1 die to any face. That die cannot be modified again. And while defending, you may spend 1 of your defense tokens to force the attacker to re-roll 1 or more dice of your choice. Tell me about your feelings on Lando Calrissian.
Lando makes my heart happy. He sparks joy, honestly. I usually am flying this guy. Whenever I see him against me, it's like dark days are ahead. It's so much fun to fly him because of his special ability. When you can discard a token and then get exactly what you need or exactly what you want when you need it, it feels so good. His ability to fly away with grit is also exceptional, coupled with rogue. So he can fly into the rear of a flotilla and secure a kill guaranteed. Especially coupled with we haven't talked about him yet this podcast, but Adar Talon.
Yeah.
Any of the good squadrons in here just get twice as good. Actually, it's not twice as good. It's better when you couple with Adar Talon. So uh, he is so good. He stays alive usually because you bring an escort like Wedge, so he'll shield for a little bit. But you use this guy to effectively eliminate those you hate, like Anakin Skywalker, or uh, do excessive damage on a ship with a double red that cannot be modified. So it can't be scattered, can't be evaded, nothing.
Yeah, for those that haven't played it and would like to be prepared in a tournament setting for your opponent to pull this on you, if you don't have squadrons, there's basically nothing you can do to protect it. But your opponent, or I guess anyone, can activate Lando with a ship that has Adar Talon, send you in, discard 1 of his defense tokens, and get that red double that can't be modified. So both defense tokens on a flotilla modify dice. And so you can't do anything about it. You take 1 to his shield and then 1 to the hull. And then in the squadron phase, he gets unactivated because of Adar. He rogues over to that hull zone and does the same thing again. And there's the flotilla kaput. He single-handedly makes the asteroid tactics objective so much harder to take because he's going to set that red to a double by discarding his brace, and then he's just gonna like grit and leave and go and sit on an asteroid for a second, get the brace back, and he just turns into a machine gun of setting your reds to doubles. It's pretty nutty.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Astro Tactics is an auto do not take when you're going up against him.
Yeah.
All right. Up next, we have Lieutenant Blount in a Z95. He is speed 3, 3 hull, 3 red anti-squadron, 1 red anti-ship. His key text reads, while another friendly squadron with swarm is at distance 1 and attacking a squadron, it may reroll 1 die in addition to any dice rerolled from swarm. He has the keyword swarm, a brace, and a scatter, and he has 14 points. Tell me your thoughts on Mr. Blount here.
Yeah, so Blount kind of falls short for me personally. We had oh man, I'm so sorry. We had Rob who won Gen Con, who had Blount in his fleet.
Yep.
Yeah, and honestly, before that podcast, I had never really considered Blount. I only own like 2 or 4 Z95s, which I feel like you need to get into like a 6+ number to really get value out of his thing. But and his points being 14, like he's worth 2 Z95s. And if you value having the scatter there, then sure. But in my opinion, Z95s are meant to be a road bump. They're just there to to give up the points. You don't really care about the damage that they can output because you're probably not really going to be killing anything anyway. So Blount providing rerolls just has never really appealed to me. There is a use case for him. I think it's honestly just a bit of a gimmick. We had him in D tier. I don't know. I don't think he's particularly great, but he's definitely better than like Han. So,
Yeah, I don't think he's great. If you are flying Z's, just to fly Z's, they're mostly just a screen. You can use them coupled with Dagger Squadron, but that's it. That's the only other thing that has Swarm in the Rebel
yeah.
faction. So if you want to fly Z's, I think it's more efficient for 10 points to fly a Z and a reserve hangar deck. So
Mm-hmm.
um, if you fly them, like you're spending another 7 points that you wouldn't have normally spent for the reroll ability, which when you're flying Z's is necessary, I will say. Like if you want to kill things at all, you kind of need the two rerolls. The one reroll usually is not enough to do much. Um, but then you're not. That's not your plan with Z's. Like with Z's, you just want to stay alive for a turn or two to keep squadrons off of you, and then revive them with reserve hangar deck and didn't do the same thing. So I don't know if he could be C tier, but I think D tier is not a bad place for him.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to take
All
away
right.
with Luke?
I would love to. Luke Skywalker is one of our set or wave zero. Was it wave one? I think it was wave zero. Uh, base game squadrons. He's in an X-wing. Speed 3, 5-hole. Anti-squadron is 4 blues. Anti-ship is a single black. His bomber escort, 2 brace defense tokens, 20 points, and while attacking a ship, treat the defender as having no shields. Which is probably one of the coolest things, and a lot of new players, myself included, are like, holy shit, you can get in there, you can get your hit crit, you can get face-up damage on there, just completely ignore their shields. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite play out that way all the time. Because you don't always roll that hit crit, and Luke just kind of dies. Like, your opponent's going to target them down, and you can't even protect him with escort because he has escort. Do you have any different thoughts for Luke?
Um, Along the same lines, he just dies. Like you take him, you can play very carefully to keep him out of the fight, and then jump him in and get some critical damage on somebody. And then with Hera and Bomber Command Center, you can get a reroll and try and fish for the crit and the double. Which getting a double with a crit on someone is actually very deadly, especially if you have Dodonna. So he synergizes pretty well with a lot of stuff that you can take, but the fact that he has escort and he's uh, exposed all the time means that people will kill him because they're scared of him, and they should be. I think he's very deadly against ships. Against squadrons, he's just mediocre with the 4 blue dice, like any other X-wing. So
It's not really mediocre. It's pretty good. It's just there's other things that do it for the same cost or less.
yeah, I mean, when I say mediocre, I mean if you're going anti-squadron, 4 dice is kind of like what you want. If you go with 3 dice, that's kind of ridiculous. Like the A wings are not great against on offense. They're decent on defense because they're gonna be dishing out 2 dice multiple times, and hopefully you have the reroll of Torin. But the 4 dice, it's good. That's what I mean by mediocre. It's good.
Yeah,
It's not like exceptional.
right. There are some reasons why you might want to play Luke. He's pretty cool with Dodonna. Uh, if you Adar him and your opponent doesn't have squadrons, and you can get a couple of damage in there, uh, there's some pretty fun things that you can do. Additionally, he fits with Hera and Biggs pretty well. I mean, Hera especially because you can re-roll his dice. That yeah, I don't see many reasons to take Luke and a competitive fleet. So I have him in D tier.
Yeah, we have him in D tier from last time as well. I think if you want to take him, you should take him. You should try him out and see how he plays. About
Mm-hmm.
20% of the time, whenever you're playing Armada, it's probably it might be a little less than that, but you're going to go against a squadless opponent. And that happened to me when I went to LVO last year.
Mm.
And Luke Skywalker was very effective in helping me seal a lot of kills. So he's very useful when there are no squadrons. But when there are squadrons, he's the first target because he can't hide. So he just ends up dying. But maybe you can play that to your advantage and have people get sucked in to kill Luke and then you wipe him out. I don't know. So D tier for him right now. That's arguable, I think, but that's where we had him last time, so I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
Up next, we have Meili Hira in a Skurg H6 bomber. She is speed 3, 6 hull. Is that? I think she has 1 red and 1 blue anti
Yes.
squadron, and then 2 blue anti ship. Her key text reads: once per activation, while a friendly ship is attacking a ship at distance 1 of you, and you are engaged by 1 or fewer squadrons, the attacker may spend 1 die to change 1 die to a face with the crit icon. She also has bomber, grit, 2 braces, and it's 26 points. Meili Hira is a prime example of too many conditional uh, circumstances in a game mechanic. So she has to fly somewhere. She has to be within distance 1. She has to be engaged by 1 or fewer squadrons. And then whenever you use the die spending ability to change something to a crit, you have to get rid of a dice. So she's not that good. She doesn't have rogue. Um, so you have to activate her. That's another piece in the puzzle of a ship or of a fleet that you have to put in there to make this thing work. She's not very good.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to add. Everything that you would want to have in a 26 point bomber that doesn't have rogue. She doesn't have that. I guess she has a good amount of hull, but she is pretty shit on anti squadron. Uh, she's not fast. Her ability's really niche. Yeah.
Her ability also kind of hurts you because um you have to spend a die in order to get your crit ability. And in the world of after 1.5, where you can spend evades at close range and medium range, this just doesn't do much for you.
Right.
So I think the reason she was so many points to begin with was because they were afraid of uh, Sato lists shooting black dice at long range or something.
Mm-hmm.
So they made it to where, okay, it's not going to be a lot of damage. It's just going to be the crit ability at long range, basically, and 1 damage or 2 damage. So,
I mean, if you're gonna play her, I'd hope it's in a Sato list. I don't see a reason. Like I've played her once in a Sato list, uh, and that was fine, I guess. But yeah.
I can't think of any other list that she would be viable in because maybe with Akbar, but then 26 points when you're flying Akbar is ridiculous to try and spend on something else
Mm-hmm.
because you want to spend that on CR90s or something with red dice. So it kind of helps because then there's a lot of blanks in red dice. You can mitigate some mitigate some uh, damage modification loss by doing this. Loss of damage, excuse me. But it's just not worth it. There's too many conditions. Not a good squadron. Not good text. So don't take her. She's a F tier squadron.
Yeah. All right. Next up we have Mart Matin in Sato's Hammer. It's got speed 4, 6 hull, anti squadrons, 4 blues, anti ship is black. At the start of the squadron phase, you may toggle your activation slider to the activated side. If you do, you may place 1 proximity mine token at distance 1. It has grit, rogue, double brace, 22 points, How do you feel about Mart?
Um, Mart is actually really good. The rogue allows him to jump around, and I guess I should note this. Whenever you replace the proximity mine, I found out based on the uh, the placement of the proximity mines in the rulebook, they have to be beyond distance one of each other. So you can't put them stacked up on one another on an obstacle unless it's got the space for it.
Mhm.
So previously, when I was playing this, I'd have people stack up two or three proximity mines and sling them in front of a ship with Ezra, which is still viable, but it's more difficult to do with multiple. You could do it probably on the station or one of the debris fields, but he does damage straight to ship's hull. So it's similar to Luke, except this guy's more survivable with six hull. He also has grit and rogue, so he can jump around. And then with Adar, you can activate him, and then uh, during the squadron phase, put out a mine as well. So there's quite a bit you can do with him. He's speed forward, and he's fast. He can jump around. So with the rogue ability as well, he kind of can conceal stuff at the end of the game if you need it to. I think I don't remember where we put him last time, but in my opinion, I think he's probably like a B tier, high B tier. I don't know if he makes it to A tier.
Yeah, I we had him in B tier.
Mhm.
Um, so Mart is pretty cool. There's some players that can use him really well. I haven't put in the work to actually get to that point. There's a specific skill set for using Mart and placing your proximity mines, doing that kind of thing. Um, One way that you can kind of think about him is as a double blue bomber that can attack ships even while you're tying down squadrons. And if you think about it like that, I mean, it's kind of just a win-win. Uh, Only downside is that they can attack your mines, but if you're engaging with everything at the same time, like you probably should be doing as a competent Armada player, then them taking shots at your mines means that they're not shooting at your ships, and so you're probably going to get the damage in. So I think Mart's pretty great. He is very different than all of the other squadrons in the game and requires a little bit of extra work to get good with that, develop those proximity mine skills. But if you get to that point, I think you're not going to regret it. Mart has some very very powerful things that he can do.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why he's in B tier and not higher is because I actually don't like him. I don't like flying against him, and I don't want to use him because it's kind of a feels bad for your opponent. So
I don't really think it's a feels bad at all. I just think that it's harder to use than other squadrons in the game. So
it makes me
uh,
feel unethical flying him. That's how a
I feel like
moral
there are
quandary.
other squadrons in the game that I feel a lot more unethical playing than Mart, but
Okay, give me other than Anakin, give me another one that you think is unethical
uh,
or feels unethical.
Jendon.
Jendon, okay.
Jendon and Saber Squadron honestly feels more gross than American Jendon. Because like American Jendon you expect, but then like for some reason that snipe for and then do it again, that that gets me.
I'm actually quite okay with that because it's we live in a world with 8R Talon as well.
Yeah.
So it feels kind of like 8R Talon to me. And I don't think the 8R Talon is it's good, but I don't think it's like crazy.
I
Okay.
think Jendon is better than AR, but I see what you mean.
I agree. Because Jindin you don't need to activate a ship and you spend an activation doing him. He doesn't take up an officer slot and he's an aura effect at 1 to 2, which is super good.
And relay.
And relay.
Yeah.
All right. So Mart is at B tier. Up next we have Nora Wexley in the Y-Wing Squadron. Can't talk right now. 3 speed, 6 hull, 3 anti squadron with blue dice, 1 black anti ship. Her key her special text reads, "Friendly squadrons with bomber at distance 1 gain the critical ability. The defending whole zone loses 1 shield." She has the keyword bomber, 2 braces, and it's 17 points. I love Nora Wexley. Um, Kind of the same for the same reason as Gold Squadron. She doesn't have heavy. She's speed 3, but she also has a double brace. So at 17 points, she becomes a squadron that can hang out in the squadron battle and deal decent damage with touring around. Um, and it's hard to kill. So, and then her special text is one of my favorites from the Rebel faction. That it makes the red dice actually playable, in my opinion. So it makes the red die faces like three of them become like double damage with the 2 crits and then the double. Um, so I love to fly her with Biggs balls and uh, X wings. Yeah, for me, I think she's a an exceptional squadron at 17 points that can hold off enemy squadrons and doesn't have heavy, so she can tie people down.
Yeah. I so Nora is kind of hard for me. There are fleets where I am like putting everything in Ryan Kingston, and I'm like, okay, this is a fleet that needs Nora, and a lot of them just don't meet that criteria. Every single dice face has just 2 critical symbols on them, so if things are working out your way, uh, and if you don't have any rerolls, which you're going to have some rerolls, but 1/4 of the time you're going to get use out of her ability. And if like once they run out of shields, then she's kind of blank text. But honestly, like the times where you get multiple Nora procs is going to feel really, really good. And she's a Y-wing that doesn't have heavy, and turns out the Y-wing, the Rebel Y-wing uniques are just overall pretty decent, especially when you take heavy away. Um, so I don't know. I think we had Nora and B.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think she's an A tier squadron. She's not an S tier squadron. You don't want to take her every time,
Yeah.
but when you do have a fighter screen, if you're trying to save points, at 17 points, I think she's easy to take. And then she boosts the ability of all your bombers, which is kind of what Rebel squadrons want to be doing is bombing. So,
I don't know. I feel like I mean you're probably not bringing her with a screen. You want to bring her in a dedicated bomber list, and a lot of the things that Rebel squadrons do. So there are a lot of really powerful ones that have bomber, and then there's also a lot of really powerful squadrons that don't have bomber. They just have a black die for anti-ship. So if you're going for like um, the YT-2400 ball or like a Shara Tycho A-wing ball, you're not going to want Nora at all. If you're going for some bombers and your aces aren't covered by other bounds, uh, you will want Nora. But finding a place for her, uh, because you're going to want Lando and you're going to want Jan and you might want Ketsu or Dash, and finding your extra spot for Nora, you're going to want Dutch. There's so many better ones in my opinion that
I
Nora
think that
gets left behind.
it's true. I think that's why she doesn't show up very often. Like people usually take the other things, but I like her because in my lists I'll take from like a light squadron screen or a medium squadron build. I'll take Wedge, Tycho, Nora, Dutch, Rogue Squadron, and Gold Squadron, and that's around 80 points. And that's it. Like it's 80 points. I can spend everything else on my ships, and then I've got 6 squadrons, 4 of which have defense tokens, and then I've got Gold Squadron, which is 6 hull, which is like having a defense token, and then Rogue Squadron, which is Rogue, which I could upgrade to a YT-2400 if I needed to. So it's 80 points for those squadrons is actually very efficient in my opinion. But yeah, I can see why people wouldn't take her.
All right. Well, next up we have Nim in Havoc, which is the coolest unique squadron name. I wish that my car was named Havoc.
You could name
Uh,
your car Havoc.
I guess I could. I think I don't remember what it was, but some of my friends back in college named my car like Petunia or something like
Ah,
that.
okay.
um. Anyway, so Nim is speed 3, 6 hull, squadron anti-squadron is 2 blue, anti-ship is a blue and a black. He has bomber, grit, double brace, 21 points. It reads blue critical. If the defender is a ship, you may choose and discard one of its defense tokens. Uh, Getting hit with Nim's Nim's crit is one of the most terrifying things about like 50% of the time. Like if you're an ISD and Nim comes in and just like first activation of actual engagement rips your brace away, then you're gonna cry. But it's kind of like Sloan, I guess. I don't know. Like it's sort of similar. Um, but the longer the game goes on, the less and less it matters. Um, you're going to start like leaning towards just wanting to get like the critical damage in there. Um, I don't know. It's just a blue crit effect is not. It's not really something that you want to be spending your points and A slots on. Doesn't really do anything for anti-squadron, and you can only resolve critical effects. Um, like squadrons cannot resolve critical effects against each other, so uh, it's not like Nim's ability will let you discard people's scatters or anything like that. So,
Yeah, it does say if a defender is a ship.
oh yeah, that's right. I guess they clarified that on the card too. So I mean, if you're ever in a situation where you have the points, the ace slot, and you don't want any of the many great aces, then Nim is squadron that exists, but he falls short in so many categories. His ability is not very impactful and just all around isn't that great that he kind of just goes in F tier, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the first time everyone reads this card, they think to themselves, "Oh my gosh, I can just toss their defense tokens. This is
Mm-hmm.
amazing." But then you look, he only has one blue against anti-ship at anti-ship, and he's
He has 2 blues for. Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah. Anti ship. Yeah.
yeah. So to get that to proc is really difficult. You can use Torin, you can use Bomber Command Center, but it doesn't work very often. And then you have to also play the mind game of I've got to get this guy free and then find an opening to try and bomb. It ends up it ends up not being worth your points. At 21 points, this guy doesn't get his ability to proc. The one or two times I have flown him, I didn't get it to proc at all, even though I had Bomber Command Center. I just rolled hits or accuracies. So that felt bad. But he uh he would be effective. Just looking at his card, it makes me want to fly him. But the experience side of me needs to know better than to put him in my list because
Yeah.
it doesn't work very well. It doesn't happen. Like you look at it and it's like, oh my god, I want to strip the braces and just like annihilate something like an SSD or something, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many other things to take.
Yeah, F tier.
All right. You want to read Rogue Squadron for us?
I will say, I think to fix Nim, if you just give him two blues for anti ship, I think that he'd be worth taking.
Yeah, this is one of those that we'll get to another one in a couple of minutes, but Nim is one of those weird cases where you actually want the blue instead of the black.
Hmm. Up next is Rogue Squadron. In an X-Wing squadron format, he is speed 3, 5 hull, 4 blue anti-squadron, 1 red anti-ship. He has the keywords of bomber and rogue, and is 14 points. I love Rogue Squadron. It gives me the ability to have rogue, It's decent at anti-squadron. It's decent at anti-ship, but not great with that red. But it can be coupled with a lot of things to try and get a reroll out of it. And he's speed 3. He's actually won me at least a couple games. At that same game where I was using Luke to bomb ships, he won the game for me on a roll, anti-ship roll of red dice. And then he also won me another game where uh, I think he's killed a couple squadrons at the very end of a game for me and given me the win in a 6-5. And then his bombing, like I don't trust red dice. And when I throw with this guy, I'm like, I'm not expecting it to hit. But it has turned up for me when I needed it. So I love this guy. His 14 points also allows me to spend an extra 2 points on a bid because normally if people have 2 more points, they'll get a YT 2400. But I would take Road Squadron almost every time because then it would give me a chance to get a bid unless I don't care about that. Even then, I may just still take this guy. So I have him. I don't remember where I had him last time. I think I may have had him in A tier.
Yeah, we had him in A tier. So Rogue Squadron to me, you touched on that. He's there for the bid. He has one less hull and one less speed than a YT 2400. Has the same exact anti-squadron armament and slightly different like die faces, but overall same average damage for the anti-ship. Red Dice with Bomber has 5 faces versus 4 with the Black Die non-bomber, but you do have that double in there. So overall, same average damage, but it's 2 points less. I honestly probably would never take Rogue unless I needed it to fit into 134 or fit into 400 or something like that. But I do remember it was really very entertaining to me 2 summers ago. Maybe it was last summer. I don't know. The first summer that I played Armada, when the Farm Hawk was the fleet to beat, and the only way to win the mirror match was to win the bid. And some players were switching one of the YT 2400s for a Rogue Squadron for 2 more points of bid. I just found that interesting. It was such a interesting like tech piece. I don't know. I really value the Speed 4 if I'm flying YT 2400s, but I mean 2 points is fairly significant, and so Rogue does find its way into some of my lists because of that. That's
All
my
right.
spiel.
Yep. Who do you have next?
Next is Shara Bay and the A-Wing Squadron. She is speed 5, 4 hull. Anti-squadron is 3 blue. Anti-ship is a single black. While performing a counterattack, her crit icons count as damage. And she has counter 3. And then she's Brace Scatter at 17 points. Shara and we'll get to Tycho soon, are kind of ubiquitous in the Armada community. I think aside from American Gendon, they show up as a pair more than anyone else. Shara is pretty aggressive, even when she's defending. She's aggressive. I mean, pretty much the only 2 ways to not just take a bunch of damage from your opponent's Shara Bay is to snipe it out of existence, or flak it, I guess. I personally, playing Shara, have had a few. Well, actually, two games out of my 7 at Worlds where I had Shara. My opponent came in with Saber Squadron and flight controllers, and got actually the flight. No flight controllers. It was 3 damage and an accuracy, and then I brace it to 2, no counter because it's snipe, and then they go in with Gendon and then got the exact same roll. So this happened. This happened twice at Worlds, and just blow up Shara with no counter, and it's rough. But I mean, she's really cheap for being able to delay your opponent's stuff for at least a turn most of the time. especially if they're bombers that don't shoot squadrons really well. They're gonna have trouble getting around that scatter. Quick punches. Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. That is the way to kill Shara. That is the correct way to kill Shara. That and Anakin Skywalker's splash damage.
Yeah.
Um, she's super effective at tying people down if they don't have grit. So you just fly her in, and then everybody has to shoot her.
Mm-hmm.
So counter 3 with the special ability of having extra damage on crits, super good. There are some times where I've seen it show up, and you get accuracies on the return. But I mean, you could also have Tora nearby and get a reroll.
Right.
So she does a lot of damage. Uh, I remember I flew her into an arc list, and she didn't die for a long time because the arcs didn't have very good offensive capabilities. And then when it came to defense, they were just not rolling hits. So she ended up sitting there and just killing a couple arcs before I freed her up with some help and then sent her to the station to heal. Very much worth her points. In fact, I think she deserves to be at least 2 more points. So easy S tier in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely.
Up next we have 10 Num. 10 Num's in a B wing. He's speed 2, 5 hull, 2 blue anti squadron with a black as well. So 3 total. And then anti ship is 1 blue, 1 black. His key text reads, while attacking a squadron, you may spend 1 blue die with a crit icon. If you do, each other enemy squadron at distance 1 of the defender suffers 1 damage. He also has a bomber keyword, 2 braces, and costs 19 points. Tin Num is one of my favorite little squadrons to try and make work in the Rebel faction. He doesn't work very well because he's slow, um, but I have made him work a few times where I'll fly in, use Adar Talon, make him go a little further, and then uh, shoot. Be able to use Torn to reroll my blue if I don't have that crit, and then if I do, I can spend it. And the fun thing about him is it happens before the scatter because you're spending your dice. So you can cause this ability to trigger before the enemy can scatter the dice. So you can make it happen no matter what. Super good. Um, his bombing is decent, but he's just slow. So you have to bring some other stuff or focus on him to try and be in the correct position. And because of that, it makes him really difficult to use. The other thing about him is um, you can put him on. Usually, what I would do is I put him on an obstacle to keep him obstructed and keep him alive, and then hope that there's enough stuff nearby that I can shoot. So something that can help a little bit is if uh, you put him in front of an enemy ship, and then you can position him wherever you want. That way, you can, without having to activate him, you can put him somewhere with a bunch of stuff in range and then shoot and do the collateral damage. There's another thing I wanted to add, but I can't remember what it was. You can go ahead and take it away.
Okay. Um, I really don't have much about 10. He's one of the few squadrons that I haven't had reason or chance to play yet. Uh, just like Nim, I kind of wish that his anti-squadron was 3 blues. I don't know. I get that it's an upgrade. Like he is the Dagger Squadron ace, so they wanted to maintain the dice pool, but I don't know. They didn't even let him keep Swarm.
Yeah,
His ability is kind of hard to cook off, and if you have Torin there, or, whatever, then sure. But he's no Anakin, that's for sure, and he's slow, so he's a D tier squadron in my book. He's definitely better than the other B-wing ace.
it looks like I negotiated him up to C tier last time.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so we'll put him up there, but he is difficult to use, a lot like the other stuff in D tier. I guess we could put him in D tier to even it out.
Yeah, I according to my list, we kept him in D, but I don't know.
Okay, we'll stick him in D tier. He's difficult to use, like Luke Skywalker.
Mhm.
All right. Who's next?
Uh, Next up, we have Tycho Selchu. Also in an A-wing squadron. Five speed, four hull, anti-squadrons, three blue, anti-ship is a black. It has counter two, brace scatter, 16 points. And Tycho is not prevented from moving or attacking ships while he is engaged. Tycho is my preferred of the two A-wing aces. If I had to pick just one, then I'd bring Tycho. Um, Mainly just because he's really kind of a pain in the ass. Not so much in the way that he does as much damage. His counters are less dice and not quite as consistent. He's ever so slightly cheaper, and you can jump from tying down squadrons to switching to a bombing run. You can tie down one group and then switch to another. Once he takes a beating, you can have him leave, go jump on the station. Uh, the line of text that lets him just go anywhere, any of the time, pretty good. He's an easy S tier.
Yeah, I agree. Um, when I first was playing with A-Wings, I thought Char was the best. And that's just because I'm looking at the damage potential. But the best part of Tycho is that you can use him to tie down squadrons wherever you want. And that includes any of the weak points on your ships. So you activate him, and then you go to the unshielded side of your ship, and you prevent bombing from taking place. Or you lock down the enemy's bombers, and then they have to deal with you with your scatter as well before they can do anything. So for that reason, and not the fact that he can do damage himself, he's consistent on bombing, which is great. That's why I like A-Wings. But his ability to protect you from all sorts of situations is, especially his cost as well, gives him an S tier spot. All right. Up next, and finally, last but definitely not least, is Wedge Antilles in an X-Wing squadron. He is speed 3, 5 hull, 4 blue anti-squadron, and 1 black anti-ship. His key text reads, while attacking an activated squadron, you may add 2 blue dice to your attack pool. He also has the bomber and escort keyword, 2 braces, and is 19 points. Wedge Antilles is, in my opinion, the best X-Wing there is in the Rebel faction. As for the aces, not I think Rogue Squadron I'd rather take over him maybe, but when you can couple him with Dutch and as well as Adar Talon, then you can hit somebody with Dutch to trigger them or to activate them. You can attack them with Wedge, and then Adar Talon Wedge again to shoot them or someone else again. So you could effectively shoot somebody with 12 dice. Now there aren't any rerolls, but if you have Hera or Torn nearby, then you can get 1 or 2 rerolls. So he has a high damage ceiling, um, and he's effective. That makes him effective on both bombing and anti-squadron capabilities. So his escort means that he's usually the first one to go down uh, while he's in a squad ball, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can uh, wait for him to go down and then send somebody else in to take his place, or be hard countering or attacking these other guys that are shooting him at the same time. So he is good in my opinion, not S tier good. So I have him in A tier.
Yeah, he falls a little bit short of S tier. He does like if you roll really well, he has the most offensive firepower out of any squadron in the game, bar Anakin. Um, he does have the most like single target anti-squadron firepower, which is pretty cool. Um, I don't know. I don't see him a whole lot. I'm not sure if that's just my area. Um, yeah, I find a place for Wedge some of the time, but uh, I don't know. I feel like in your average list, you're either going to want other people, other aces, or you're going to have room for Wedge, and he's going to serve you really well. It's pretty binary in that uh, he's cheap, he does a lot of damage, I'm glad that he got the black die for his anti ship, which with bomber is really cool. So yeah, I mean, Wedge is solid. I don't have anything else to add.
Yeah, the black dice makes him really good, I think, compared to all the other X-wings that have except for Luke that have red dice. So he does suffer from the same problem where the escort, like Luke, makes him a target early on. But if you have both of them together, then they have to choose like, am I going to sacrifice my squads to kill Luke, or am I going to sacrifice part of my ships to kill Wedge first? So you may have a little bit of a give people a decision to make. So that's our tier list. Can you see where everything is right now?
I think so.
All right. For our elevation section.
Or wait, hold on. Do you want to go over or like recap
Oh,
everything we have so far?
that is a good point. We should do that for all of our listeners. In the S tier, we'll alternate here. I'll take S, and then you can pass
Yeah,
take
sure.
A. So S tier, we have Dutch Vander in the Y wing, Gold Squadron in the Y wing, Jan Ors in the Moldy Crow, which is the Hawk 290, Lindo Calrissian in the Millennium Falcon, Shara Bay in an A wing, and Tycho Selchu in the A wing.
All right, A tier. We have Dash Rendar, Fenril, Ketsu Onyo, Rogue Squadron, and Wedge Antilles.
In B tier, we have Biggs Darklighter, both of the Harrison Doulas, Mart Matten, and Nor Wexley.
Our C tier is Corin Horn, Dagger Squadron, and Green Squadron.
D tier, we have Lieutenant Blount, Luke Skywalker, and Tin Num.
And finally, our F tier is Han Solo, Tatum Jarrus, Kian Farlander, Molly Hura, and Nim.
There's a lot of squadrons in the top end of the spectrum and a lot in the lower end of the spectrum here.
Yeah, it's a fairly well-rounded uh, start to our ace tier list.
Yep. All right. For our elevation section, is there any squadron, let's say in D or F tier, that you would like to elevate, or how would you improve them?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember what I did last time. I think I might have done Han Solo. Um, I think I oh, that's right. Han Solo can make the Kessel run in 14 parsecs. We should give him speed 5. That's my fix.
Okay. I think that would help him out quite a bit.
Yeah, he's like a slightly better TIE defender at that point because he's super quick and bombs pretty efficiently and also does anti-squadron really efficiently and also has a lot of health, and he gets the bonus of being able to shoot first. Just speed 3 is pretty lacking, especially when there's so many speed 3 squadrons in this faction.
Hmm.
So I make that hunk of junk go real fast, and I think Han could see a place in this world.
I have two thoughts, and they're both on Luke Skywalker.
All right, let's hear it.
So the first one is Luke Skywalker was running down the trench, and he was focused solely on shooting the ship or shooting the torpedoes. So I think he should maybe ignore engagement, not engagement necessarily, but ignore squadrons, not be able to move but can shoot
Give him grit or
ships.
something.
No, I mean a special ability where he cannot
Oh,
move, but he can ignore engagement to shoot ships.
oh, I see. Okay.
So, and then the second ability that I was thinking of was I think he should have dodge because he has the force.
Mm-hmm.
Like the force is strong with this one is like one of the major, like, is a huge line in A New Hope
Yeah.
from Darth
Dodge
Vader.
and or adept for both Luke and TIE Advanced Vader is
Hmm.
something that I hear a lot and I think would be really helpful for the both of them.
Sure.
Uh,
TIE Advanced Vader needs a lot of help. I think TIE Advanced Vader. We'll get to him later, but I think he should get screen.
Screen's kind of a droid thing. I don't. Well, I mean, we'll have plenty of time to talk about him in a couple of weeks, but
Yeah. All right. Well, to wrap up, I want to make a few announcements. We got the grand tournament schedule out from AMG recently, and shocker, there is no X-wing or Armada listed. So it looks like they're completely just forgetting they ever had these game lines.
Yeah. I
So
mean, they took we will no longer be developing these games. They took it to the extreme,
I mean,
which I'm not expect or I'm not. Uh, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I expected this. Like I was not expecting them to continue organized play support. It's a shame, but I'm at this point ready to be done with AMG, so I
yeah,
don't care.
I would be very excited if I heard that some like FFG picked it back up. I don't think that's the case. I heard a rumor about that, and I was like, no, there's no way.
No.
So the fact that they're dropping support altogether kind of is a huge bummer. They didn't say that previously, I don't think, but it doesn't look like they're reprinting. It doesn't look like they're supporting at tournaments. So I think there may be some bad blood or something behind the scenes that uh, maybe the wheels are were rubbed the wrong ways or something with the
I don't know
community.
what it is. All I know is that if there is any of the limited Armada things that are left on the market, if you need to pick those up, go ahead and grab them. Hell, we're doing Squadron tier lists. I just had to go and pick up my third and fourth copy of Rogues and Villains so I can fly some goofy quad fire spray lists.
Oh yeah,
Um, there's still some product up on Gamers Guild. We're not sponsored or anything, but that's one of the only places where there's new in box stuff. Um, be wary of eBay scams and people trying to
Facebook
scalp
scams.
product.
Yeah,
Yeah, um, you know, talk to the people before you buy things if you can. But I mean, if you need product, this is going to be one of the last few chances these next couple of weeks um, before I mean, there's nothing presumably, and I'm sure over the next couple of years. I mean, I plan on playing this game until there's nobody left to play it with. And over the next couple of years, I'm sure people are going to be selling their stuff in lots, and the average price on the fleet will go down. But for the time being, if you're planning on going to Worlds this year and there's anything else you need, just get it now. Yeah, if you have the financial means to do so.
I do think we should have like a swap and shop at Worlds because I mean people know people that have stopped playing the game and may have stuff they
Mm-hmm.
want to sell. This would be the perfect opportunity to trade. So I
Yeah.
would say if you're going to Worlds and if you have extra space in your luggage, maybe make some room for it to bring stuff back, or bring some stuff with you if you want to take it off your hands. So I don't. There's no official swap and shop like type thing at Worlds, I think, but I think that should be something that happens,
Yeah.
especially with all the scams going around. I know there was a lot right off the bat, and then I had my own experience, but it was with another product
Mm-hmm.
where I was supposed to get a core set and I only got half,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a big bummer.
But I'm also sure that, like we're going to see the rise in 3D printing. There's already some incredible artists who are working on 3D printed ships, tools, dials, all that stuff, and with no official rules to bind us, I guess like official regulations on that regard. Um, I'm happy to see what 3D modeling artists can do and what we can create. So
Yeah, I guess with that, our shout out today is going to be the Armada Rules Set Collective, who are taking over the development and caretaking of the game from here on out. If you haven't heard already, you can find their forum on the Armada Hub on Discord. Um, that that was official as of well, I mean, it officially starts here in October whenever the final.
well,
Uh,
they're not going to be talking about anything until after Worlds when AMG drops us off. Like AMG will no longer be supporting us after Worlds in 2025,
right.
and that's when ARC will make their first like real announcement.
Okay. Yeah. My thinking was the last development we're going to get from AMG is here in
Right.
October, and then following that is going to be all them. So
Mm.
you're correct. Yeah. After Worlds is when it all turns over to ARC.
Yeah.
But they are open to feedback. So if you have any feelings about what is going on in the points adjustments or anything like that that happens, if there is any points adjustments coming from the October surprise, then we can talk about it there.
I have a quick shout out real fast.
Sure.
So for anyone who doesn't know, I'm in Northwest Arkansas, and we have a fairly decent sized community here. Uh, we're about to get ready for our big tournament of the year, Osmo, coming up October 26th and 27th. Come hang out. But I was just this weekend informed that there's a small crowd in Central Arkansas. So if that's closer to you, if you go by Little Rock at all, um, put a comment in this video or send me a message. I'm Bodhi in fancy italics on Discord. Um, just get in contact with me and I can get you hooked up with the Central Arkansas crew. From the brief messages that I've shared with them, they seem really awesome and they're ready to get some more games in. So if you're in that area, I'll hook you up.
Awesome. All right, with that, thank you for listening to the Speculation Station. I'm your host, Captain Ketter. You want to say goodbye, buddy?
Goodbye.
All right, take care, y'all.